How's it rockin', Dween Nation? This is the Dween Sports Podcast. We're about to get underway. But before we do, we'd love if you could like, comment, subscribe, or share. We are posting weekly sports content, and we want to build up the brand that is Dween Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy.
Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Pies, alongside Genoa, Agudelo, and free agency is near, and we are going to continue this free agency predictions train. We already had our quarterbacks discussion. Now we're moving into the running back position. It isn't super shiny as for the free agents. I think a lot of teams might be looking towards the NFL draft because there are some big names, especially if you were watching or in tune with the combine this past weekend. A lot of big winners: Omarion Hampton, Quinshaw Judkins, Cam Scatterbo, big names like that are going to be players in the draft and may sway some teams not to jump into the free agent running back market. But all these guys that we're going to talk about, they're probably going to land somewhere, and we're going to predict where they do. But before we do all that, how you doing, Genoa?
Yo, Dween Nation. Justin, it would be smart for a lot of these teams to not overpay for a lot of these guys. You know, last year it was probably like the best offseason as far as running backs. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon. And, you know, this year it takes a step back for sure. But, you know, I guess last year's running back, you know, kind of dictated how the playoffs were, how the Super Bowl went, how the Eagles got there, how the Ravens were able to have some success, the Texans with their new running backs. This year, I feel like it'll be like an addition by subtraction. So guys that you don't go out for these, you know, offseason, like running backs that you pass on this offseason will potentially help you out, Justin, because you mentioned that the draft running backs are really sensational, but some of these running backs do have value, and I think they do have some fantasy value, and I think there are some teams that could utilize them to kind of boost their career for next season.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There's a few names. Obviously, some are, you know, near the age cliff of their prime. Some are young, somewhat to underproven names. But we're going to go in and start discussing these, and we'll start at the top of the running back free agency class. We're going to start with Aaron Jones, obviously from the Minnesota Vikings. He had a very solid season. He played in all games, so obviously he was showing out his health this year. He ran for 1,100 yards and rushed for 5 touchdowns while receiving 2 touchdowns. Overall, very solid year. But Genoa, where do you think he's going to land in 2025?
You know, Justin, I think it's very interesting because, like you mentioned, he played, you know, most of the season. And, you know, there was Ty Chandler kind of eyeing that spot there. I think Cam Akers came back a little bit during the season. But you know what, Justin? I think that he does go back to Minnesota. But with him, it's kind of up in the air. I think it would be a Vegas thing to do to sign him since their running back room, they pretty much have no one there in Vegas. But I'd say he resigns in Minnesota.
Yeah, no, I'm going to lean the same way. I have Minnesota pinned for him just because I don't think many people are going to be clamoring for him, unfortunately, although he is the top guy in the class. But hey, he's nearing 30 years old, and I mean, although being in 17 games this year, he had, I think, 2 to 3 of those games he left with injury. And also just in his past, he has dealt with a lot of injuries, not a very big running back. But he played very solidly for the Vikings, so I think that's enough to bring him back. I think they will either keep around Cam Akers or Chandler, or maybe dive into that running back class, maybe a second or third or fourth round guy, and they can complement each other. But Aaron Jones, Minnesota, will stick with that. Moving to the next running back, actually a guy that I think is destined to, at least in my opinion, not stay with his current team, and that is Najee Harris. I have him signing with the Las Vegas Raiders. I've seen a couple rumors sprinkled here and there, and what I do know about the most about Pete Carroll is he loves to run the football, and the current running back room in Las Vegas is Zamir White and Alex Madison and Sincere McCormick, none of which is going to get you anywhere, especially with a guy who wants to run first. And so Najee Harris, a big back, is able to catch out the backfield as well when he needs to. I think he can sub in right there and possibly be their, you know, workhorse back. I also could see them getting another guy to complement Najee, but I have him in Las Vegas. What do you think?
Justin, you're really funny because you said Pete Carroll loves to run the football, and I think Seahawk fans are a little disappointed with that statement. They wish Pete Carroll had ran the ball. Just saying.
That's true. That's true.
But Justin, you know what? I love it. I love Las Vegas. I'm going to go with another West Coast team, San Francisco. because of what's been going on with Christian McCaffrey. You don't know if he's going to be healthy. He had a lot of workload in 2023, and then 2024 it just carried away. He just couldn't stay healthy, and I think unfortunately that might be something that like carries over to where San Francisco's very hesitant to give McCaffrey over 20 touches, and I think with what they have after Elijah Mitchell, Gurriendo, I think there was other guys that they had after McCaffrey. They just got hurt. Jordan Mason too was a guy that had most of the work share. He got hurt. And I think they're going to want to get a reliable running back, Najee Harris. He hasn't really missed much games. All his career there in Pittsburgh, I think he had a battle with James Conner at first. And I could be wrong on that. And then James Conner went to Arizona. And then he had a battle with Jalen Warren for most of his career. And you know what? I think that Najee Harris is a solid running back. And I think, Justin, don't quote me on this, but whatever team he goes to, I have a feeling that he'll have a late season surge. And may I say, fantasy league winner, because that's the late season. I think the first, let's say he goes to Vegas, right? I think the first 6-7 games, he doesn't really do much. People are dropping him. I mean, this is a guy that they draft 7th or 8th round, and he's getting dropped 2nd or 3rd. But I think this is a guy that like week 11 takes off, Justin. And then like week 16, 7 fantasy, he's getting you 120 yards too. It's like, where is this coming from? Like Najee Harris with his new team. He's one of those guys that I feel like if you were to go to a new team like a Vegas, like a San Francisco, he will get utilized at the end of the season. I don't think he gets utilized at all in the first 8 weeks. I mean, you will probably see no show from Najee Harris. He'll be at the top of your waiver wire most of the next season, but the back part of that season, I just feel like he has like a Bucky Irving like breakout, like a guy you just didn't see coming, but like in a veteran style. But I would love to see him in Vegas. I think he'd be a nice goal line workhorse there. But San Francisco, I feel like it would be a good 1-2 punch to keep McCaffrey healthy.
Yeah, and with Najee, I mean, we've seen it, especially his rookie year, where he can play at the heights of a top 10, top 7 running back. He did it there. And now the San Francisco idea is really interesting to me. Obviously, you have McCaffrey, but San Francisco is known for just about one thing, and especially in the running back room, injuries are plaguing that backfield at all times. Jordan Mason's a free agent. Elijah Mitchell is a free agent. So there's space in there for another running back to join in. I could see it happening. And as we mentioned, Najee, not going through many injuries, has not missed a football game in his NFL career through 4 seasons. So he is healthy, whereas 49ers running backs usually are not. So I think that's interesting there. We have 2 separate locations. Let's look at the next running back. A former superstar, had a scary leg injury last year, came back 2 years ago, I guess, essentially. Came back this year, wasn't the same. Also, his team was really bad. We're talking about Nick Chubb. Now, he obviously has been a Cleveland Brown. It's kind of stamped on his chest, but it's looking like, in my opinion, that things might be changing. And I have him changing teams as well. I think that Cleveland kind of is going to cast him aside, be like, hey, your time here is done. You're old. You're washed. And he decides he's going to pull an Aaron Jones of sorts and join the rival or in-division opponent in the Pittsburgh Steelers, where I see Najee's leaving. Nick Chubb joins the team and becomes kind of their goal line running back. Not super big and fantasy-wise, but I think it's a good landing spot for him.
Justin, I love it. With Cleveland, they are fully rebuilding. Myles Garrett is out the door. Today, there was reports that Deshaun Watson has played his last game with Cleveland, and they have nobody there, right? They just traded for Judy, really. But Cleveland is now back once again, rebuilding mode. This is probably like the 7th or 8th rebuild they've had since I've been alive. But hey, I'm a Texans fan, so I know a lot about that anyways. But anyways, Justin, I feel like with Nick Chubb, he still has some juice left. One thing about me, guys, Dwayne Nation and the Genoa Agudelo Fantasy Football Hall of Fame, Nick Chubb does have his spot in the Hall of Fame for me. He has won me championships in different leagues. He has also won me money, so I love Nick Chubb. He's always very so special. He was a great back out of Georgia. I think for me, Justin, he goes to Tennessee. I think I would be interested to see. I like the way Pollard ended the season last year. I was really skeptical. I was really pessimistic, Justin, on how the Titans would use Pollard, but he impressed me this season, and I would love to see a power back to Pollard's speed back. I think Nick Chubb has some juice, just like how I talked about Najee. I think the same thing with Chubb. Now, obviously, Najee didn't have Najee didn't have an injury, major injury like Chubb has. So I think Chubb as well, first 5 to 6 weeks, we won't hear from him. He'll probably have 5 or 6 carries each in those weeks leading up until week 7 or 8, blow up game with the Titans. I think that Sometimes, starting running backs like a Pollard may get dinged up, may miss a week. And I think that that training camp and a couple weeks into the season, that's all for Nick Chubb to get back on track. Now, he did suffer, an ankle injury late in the season. He was out the last 3 or 4 games, something like that. Mm-hmm. That is another factor that could push it back a little. So I feel like maybe we won't see him in action the first 2 weeks of the season. Maybe he starts on IR. That could be a chance that he starts, like an IR the first 3 to 4 weeks, depending on where that team's bye is. So I like Chubb in Tennessee. Doesn't really have to, shine off the bat. There's Pollard there that most likely might have a new quarterback under center. So I like Chubb to go to Tennessee.
That's a really interesting one. I didn't think about it, but Pollard and Tajay, they're not goal line backs. So that's where I can see Chubb kind of finding a role with the team. Unfortunately for Nick Chubb, I think he's going to be one of those players this offseason that he might not get signed until like training camp kind of area. Like he's not a guy that teams are just going to go jumping for in March or April. I think he's kind of destined to be a guy that, maybe they scoop up later on. But after Nick Chubb, let's talk about a guy who came off a scary injury a couple years ago as well, but really revitalized his career this past year in J.K. Dobbins. I have him returning to the Los Angeles Chargers. I think that he knows what's good for him and the fact that, hey, in this role with this coach, I was able to kind of step out of the shadow of what, he hadn't been. And so I think that J.K. is in line to do that again, even though I could see the Chargers going for a rookie running back to kind of step into those shoes to be their kind of workhorse. That's the only thing that I could see J.K. not re-signing. But I have J.K. staying in Los Angeles. Where do you have J.K. going?
Yeah, Justin, I'm going to agree with you. I think that they might have something with Kamani Vidal. I think that they were kind of using him the last 2 games. They're kind of just throwing him out there. And they have Gus Edwards, who I think signed on a 1-year deal. He could be a free agent. But I think that Harbaugh might want to find his next running back, his Frank Gore. I mean, obviously, Frank Gore had some fantastic years under Harbaugh. And I feel like that he wants his running back, right? So, man, wouldn't it be crazy if they get a guy like Marion Hampton, I think you mentioned, maybe Scatterboo there. I think that Travion Henderson, a guy that, Ohio State, and Harbaugh's a former Michigan guy. So he might be like, I kind of know about this guy. I'm familiar. And so I really like these running backs in this draft class, Justin, to be honest. I'm excited to talk about that later. But I think for J.K. Dobbins, I think that he's going to end up with Vegas. I think that with Vegas, they're going to want to hold as much as cap space as they can. And I think Pete Carroll's going to say, you know what, let's get Javonte Williams in, a former in-divisional kind of guy with Denver. Let's get him on a cheap deal. He's a speedy guy. We can get our power guy in the draft. So let's, I think that you can probably, I'm sorry, J.K. Dobbins. I keep getting it confused, right? I'm sorry. J.K. Dobbins, I'm sorry. Other individual guy with the Chargers. I think like they'll get him in on as a friendly deal. I don't know if a lot of these teams are going to be throwing money at J.K. Dobbins because they're going to feel like he's gotten hurt. Even in his healthy year, he got hurt, had some injury scare. I think he had an injury scare against the Ravens on a Monday Night Football game where he missed the remainder of the game, and that was almost an ACL tear, I believe. So I think teams are going to be very hesitant to pay J.K. Dobbins, but I do think that he can get a friendly deal, a potential role starting job, being as if I think he goes to the Vegas Raiders. I think they also get a running back there, but I think J.K. Dobbins. I'm sorry. I think he, I keep saying Javonte. You might have to talk about him.
They're right there on the list. I think
they remind me of each other.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I can see that. The Vegas Raiders are getting some new running backs in the room, so we'll see how that goes. I think the last guy that we can talk about that to me has possible value heading into next year is Rico Dowdle. He had a very solid year with the Cowboys. He is a free agent. What's it going to look like for him? I have him going to the Cleveland Browns. I think that he brings a little bit of a different, change of pace than what Nick Chubb did. He's a little faster. He can catch a little bit and help out a possible rookie quarterback. I think that even though I feel like a lot of these running backs, the same kind of story. They're going to be brought to a team that eventually drafts a rookie running back. Like there's literally, I'm not even kidding, there's literally 9 to 12 running backs that I think could have value from the draft, like from rookies. Like I'll name it for you guys. Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton, Quinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson, Ollie Gordon, I really like, Cam Scatabo, Caleb Johnson, Bayshaw Tutin, Rocket Sanders, Trevor Etienne, Jaquindon Jackson, Jarquez Hunter. Those are some names really that I think could make an impact. So I think free agency might be a little underwhelming. I know I said this at the top of the show, but for running backs, and some might take longer than others. But anyway, back to the Rico. What do you have for Rico? Where's he landing?
So part of me thinks that he actually returns to Dallas. I think that Jerry Jones is a little. He likes to keep the players that he drafted and pay them at a fair price. But if that's not the case, I would like to see him in Cincinnati there, Justin, with Chase Brown. I think this might be something to where the league is shifting towards. I think the Lions have kind of started something new where they have two pretty good running backs. And unfortunately for the league, Philly has Saquon Barkley, and they have Shipley, who I liked. He had a big play at the end of that NFC title game to kind of, waste the clock. And obviously it was a 30-point game. But I feel like, the league is shifting towards that, right? Where two running backs kind of like Kansas City. They had Kareem Hunt and Pacheco. Yes, they didn't use them often. I think that with Buffalo during the season, they had this James Cook, and then they throw in like Ray Davis and I think Ty Johnson. The Jets, obviously they were bad, but they still had Brees Hall, and they threw in that one. What was his name? For who?
Oh, wait, what team?
For the Jets, the backup for the Jets.
They had Michael Carter at one point. Oh, they had Braylon Allen.
Braylon Allen. I can't believe I spaced on that. I like Braylon Allen. So I feel like that might be something that the league is going to. So I feel like maybe that could be a thing for Rico Dotto in Cincinnati. But if not, I don't see them drafting high for running back the Cowboys. So I feel like they might just say, hey, bring back Dowdle, and maybe we can get a running back in the fourth.
Yeah, I could see it. I could definitely see Jerry not doing the Genty move, which I think a lot of fans want him to do. That seems so Jerry of him. Anyway, let's move. Let's do some quick hitters. These are some of the final names that I think are somewhat relevant that I just want you to go and just give me your answers for the audience. We got Raheem Mostert. We got Kareem Hunt. We got A.J. Dillon, and we have Javonte Williams. Who do you have for each of those spots?
A.J. Dillon might be a practice squad player going forward. I don't see him really getting a role. Kareem Hunt, it's a no-brainer. I think he stays in Kansas City. I don't think he really has a good deal anywhere else. He was brought to Kansas City because of Pacheco's injury, so I feel like he's not going to really be greedy and want to go anywhere else. And then lastly, for Raheem Mostert, I actually have him in Buffalo. I'm buying into this thing that a lot of teams should have a speed back like James Cook and then kind of like a power workhorse. Raheem Mostert, he's not going to play every game for you, Justin. So he's going to get you 7 or 8 games. Maybe you can kind of hold him warm for the postseason if you need some, extra juice at the running back position. So I like Mostert to go to Buffalo.
Okay, and the last one, Javonte Williams, former Bronco.
Javonte Williams, yes. Okay, so I was confused with him and Dobbins. I actually have Javonte Williams going to Green Bay. And I feel like the reason why I say that is there's Josh Jacobs there, but how much of Josh Jacobs can you use? There's only so much Josh Jacobs you can use. The Packers were so reliant on Josh Jacobs last year. It was really their only player that they could rely on. Even their quarterback at times was very shaky. So I feel like they're going to want to up that running game. And they're not going to draft. I feel like they should go to the draft for wide receiver. They paid Josh Jacobs all that money. So go ahead and get Javonte Williams on a friendly deal. He struggled really bad last year, this past season in Denver, really the past 2 seasons. We were so excited for Javonte after that injury in 21, but then Justin, he has not been back himself. So I think he needs a nice new home there. Green Bay will take him in warm, or it's cold, but they'll make him warm. Josh Jacobs is in front of him, so he doesn't. There's no pressure on him, and I think he'll work well as a speedy back in the Floors offense.
I think that's really interesting there. I hadn't thought about Green Bay, but I think that might be my new favorite spot. I had him going to the Colts to kind of back up Jonathan Taylor. The guy they had there last year, Trey Sermon, not super, flashy.
Yeah.
So I think that Javonte could fill in there. As for those other 3 guys, I agree. I had Kareem Hunt in Kansas City. Where I put A.J. Dillon is I put him in Buffalo as kind of the big goal line possibly back, even though they were using Ray Davis for that. But Ray Davis is really not that big of a running back. He's kind of, stocky. But that's where I have A.J. Dillon. But I could agree with you. He's kind of a guy that might be a 3rd, 4th string, a practice squad guy. Yeah. Unfortunately for him, the fall from grace for A.J. Dillon. Like there were some real hopes back in the day. Hasn't worked out. And then the last 2, I said, okay, the last one, Javonte Williams. I said that. Raheem Mostert. Jeez Louise. Right. I have him going back to Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, the team he used to be on. Especially, obviously, he's running back injury prone, but
Yeah.
he could be a solid depth piece for Kyle Shanahan, and there's history there.
Yeah.
So that's where I have Raheem Mostert. And then let's finish off this episode with throwing in some of these tight ends, because tight ends, there's not many. There's not many high level free agent tight ends in this class. The top one, we'll start real quick. Zach Ertz. I think we might have a collective decision here, but I have him going back to the Commanders. He really was a security blanket for Jaden Daniels. I feel like he's going to have a cheap deal to stay with the Commanders and be their lead guy for one more year, and then he'll retire. What do you think?
Yeah, Justin, that could be an option. I'm going to agree with you. I think he does go back to Washington, but I think he could also return to Philly. I feel like he has a lot of strong feelings towards the city of Philadelphia and the Eagles. He had a great game against him in the NFC title game. He had a great first half. I mean, he was catching almost everything. He's a Philly legend. He never really wanted to leave. That trade. I think it was a trade that sent him to Arizona originally. Right. And so I think that could be an option. But hey, if I'm Washington, I'm definitely doing everything I can to bring back Zach Ertz. He's a great locker room guy. He's a Hall of Famer, Justin. Literally, He is a Hall of Famer. He's a top 5 tight end of our era. Obviously under Kelsey, under Gronkowski. He's actually, I think I take him in our era over Kittle. I know that might be, I would say it's a stretch, but I take Ertz because he had a great 3-4 year run. Even in Arizona, but give him back to Washington. He's a great player.
All right, yeah. So we are kind of in agreement there. Let's just do some quick hitters. These are the last 3, and then we'll wrap up. We got Juwan Johnson of the Saints, Mike Gesicki of the Bengals, and Tyler Conklin of the Jets. Do you have the landing spots for those 3 guys?
I think maybe Minnesota brings back Conklin on a fair deal. Not Minnesota. I'm sorry. New York. Jets. I know you for the Jets. Yes,
he used to play for the Vikings, though, too.
He did. He was once upon a time with the Stephon Diggs Vikings, I believe.
Yeah.
With Juwan Johnson, you bring him back to New Orleans. He's been a really reliable tight end there. Obviously, Taysom Hill kind of takes a lot of the shine because he's like an ultimate gadget utility guy. And Juwan Johnson really doesn't get a lot of shine. He does get looks, and to me, it's always as if he's always scoring on a random Sunday, Justin. It's like a random Sunday afternoon in Carolina, or it's like some crazy blowout in New Orleans where the Saints are just winning by 40 randomly, right? And he's a good tight end, still fairly young there. Really solid dude. I like Juwan Johnson. If I'm the Saints, I'm keeping him. So you can get some wide receivers, some running backs. Kamara's getting old. I think you need to focus on other areas if you're the Saints as far as offense. And I think he can work well in Kellen Moore's new offense there in New Orleans. You said the other guy was Gesicki, right? Yeah. If I'm Cincinnati, let's bring back Gesicki. I mean, he's a lot of these tight ends are going to be easy money. Most of them won't, need to be paid over, 2-3 mil, that like minimum, like veteran minimum that most vets have in the NFL. So definitely that's a guy that you can bring back in Cincinnati and give Joe Burrow another, have another season with him. Maybe Gesicki can break out because once upon a time he was really kind of good in Miami.
Yeah, no, I agree. I had the same thoughts. Mike Gesicki returning to the Bengals. Juwan Johnson, I'm going to follow some of the rumors I've heard that he rejoins Sean Payton and joins the Broncos. Ooh. I think that could be something of interest if they don't draft one of those top tight ends in Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland or Gunnar Helm or Harold Fannin. One of those 4 guys could be a Bronco. I would really like that landing spot. But other than that, Juwan Johnson could go to Denver. That'll be my prediction. And then the last one, Conklin. I could see the Jets, but for some reason in my gut, I'm feeling the Rams to be I think the Rams, now that they're kind of moving on from Cooper Kupp, that they might, kind of move back to more of that 12 personnel that they used to have where they have 2 tight ends on the field. Give me Higbee, give me Conklin, and then give me like Puka and maybe, a Javonte Adams or something like that. But anyway, that's what we have. Dwayne Nation, running backs, tight ends, free agency. It's only, a week away. It's only a week away, which is crazy enough to hear. But yeah, so if you're interested with wide receivers, that's going to be coming out at the end of the week. And if you're curious about quarterbacks, go backwards. If you're curious about the NFL draft and what who's going to draft who, we've been posting that. We have our first, 1.0 mock draft last week. We're going to continue to do that every week. So stay tuned, Dwayne Nation. Thank you guys for watching. And Genoa, send us out.
Yo, Dewey Nation, this was our free agency predictions, running backs, and tight ends edition. This was a good episode. We have wide receivers, and we have a lot to get to, Dewey Nation. We got draft season around the corner, free agency, like Justin mentioned, a week away. So stay tuned, keep watching. And as always, we love you guys. And as always, peace.